G'day, I'm Stephen Page from Page Probe and Family and Fertility Lawyers, and welcome to the Australian Family and Fertility Law podcast. Today I'm talking about the perils of legislating too soon. If we go back to, and I'm talking about Queensland in this case, if we go back to 2023, the then Labor Health Minister, Shannon Fennerman, said, we must regulate assisted reproductive technology, in other words IVF, in Queensland because of all these horror stories, and we must do it yesterday, in other words before the next state election, which was in about October, November last year. And indeed that came to pass when the government wrote to stakeholders, including me. We were given an entire 13 days from a standing start to put in submissions. The shortest period I've ever been asked to put in submissions, but I'm delighted with the process that then played out, in that I thought it'd be like the ACT where they go 14 days and then you hear nothing, absolutely nothing, just crickets, and had no idea what the form of the bill might be. The Queensland ART review unit at Queensland Health, to its credit, spent a lot of effort then dealing with stakeholders, having meetings of various kinds, and I had a couple of them either as a group or one-on-one about particular aspects of the bill or the proposed bill. But it was all done in a rush, and the public servants involved said very clearly, we have this tight deadline and we're trying to do our best, but we have a very tight deadline. And then what have we seen? Well, the bill was enacted with bipartisan support in September last year, just before the election, and the then opposition speakers, two of them, because I was watching, I was at Parliament, I watched from the gallery, said that there might be some unintended consequences of the bill, and they didn't know what they were, but they were worried that there might be unintended consequences given the rush in which the bill was done. And the bill, following its enactment, the Act started in part in September last year, and there were supposed to be more changes from this Act in September this year, 2025, and then the rest started on the 1st of March 2026. Well, then the story started trickling out. And the big story was that there was a sperm donor, a number of sperm donors who provided their sperm through an overseas IVF clinic based in the US called Zytex. And this sperm had been supplied to patients of two Queensland clinics, Monash IVF and Queensland Fertility Group, who suddenly discovered that they couldn't use the sperm. Why? Because the changes from September last year said that the sperm donor must, and this applied to sperm provided before the date, before September last year, must supply their email and mobile phone number. Well, Zytex had got contact details for the sperm donors but hadn't got those, and there was no requirement under Queensland law for that to be done, let alone the law over in Georgia in the US. And the result was patients were suddenly told by the clinics, sorry about this, hate to tell you, but you can't use, because it's a criminal offence for us to supply this sperm or allow you to use this sperm. So a bit of a mess. The matter played out in the media, and the government then said, well, actually we've got a bit of a fix. Yeah, you can use it. Look, we're going to change it, but we don't want the patients disadvantaged. So that's one of the focus. We don't want the patients disadvantaged. Since then, a bill has been worked up, and this is the anodyne named Health Legislation Amendment Number 3 Bill 2025, and that bill has been presented to Parliament. Today is the 18th of November 2025. Tomorrow, the 19th of November 2025, I give evidence at Parliament about this bill. This bill amends a number of health laws, and there are two that stand out that I made submissions about. One was the Assisted Reproductive Technology Act, and the other is the Transplantation and Anatomy Act. The ART Act, as I call it, there are a number of changes on the way through, but the two that stand out are these: the fix for the Zytex problem, so you get contact details, but it doesn't have to be prescribed of mobile phone number and email address, so that problem is fixed. And the other is a counselling requirement. The ART Act says, and this bit hasn't started, it was due to start in March next year, if you want to do counselling, and the clinic must do counselling, must be of the patient and their spouse. Well, what happens if the patient has split up from their spouse? If you're in a de facto relationship, that's okay because, well, it ends when they separate. But what if you're in a civil partnership or in a marriage? Well, it doesn't end until the civil partnership has ended, and it doesn't end until the marriage has ended. In a recent video, I've talked about a case in Western Australia where there's a challenge to the Surrogacy Act, and I've outlined in that video 3 cases where state laws were held to be invalid, and these state laws restricted access to IVF because they were in breach of the Commonwealth Sex Discrimination Act. And it's the same problem. The ART Act, if it commenced in this form, and it hasn't, and wasn't going to commence until March, would mean that if you had a woman who had separated from her husband, for example, and comes to the clinic and says, I'm in treatment, and is then told, sorry madam, we can't give you treatment because your husband isn't in counselling. How did I become aware of this? Well, the counsellors were up in arms about it because they were saying, we're not going to give counselling in these circumstances, it's outrageous. And even worse, if that relationship was a domestic violence relationship, for example, that there is a protection order that says he shall have no contact with her, it'd be a criminal offence for that counselling to take place. So the good news is there's a fix in the bill. What the bill doesn't do is it doesn't fix one of the problems that I identified in the original bill. It doesn't allow births, deaths and marriages registrar in Queensland, who will run the Queensland Central Register, to talk with counterparts interstate. So everyone's in their own silo. Bit of a problem. The other aspect is the Transplantation and Anatomy Act. There's a provision in the bill that says we want to be able to extract blood from someone who's dying to run some tests to see about the quality of their organs because that person is an organ donor. I think that's marvellous. Anything that makes the process of organ donation quicker, simpler, easier is good. And I don't profess to be an expert about organ donation, but I have helped widows with sperm retrieval, posthumous sperm retrieval. And a few of those blokes who've just died happen to be organ donors. And I've seen cases where the organ donor team are suddenly in conflict with the widow because they want their bits out and she wants the sperm out, and there's this conflict about who goes first. And I've also seen particularly marvellous case from Central Queensland earlier this year where the two worked in sync. And I want to give a shout out at this stage to a doctor from Caboolture, Dr. Doug Feinbloom. He works at Caboolture Hospital. He came up with the brilliant idea of a cheat sheet, a 2-page sheet for the organ donor teams, and this isn't part of the bill, but I just thought it was marvellous, I want to share it, that, well, sperm retrieval also happens, this is how you make the two work in combination. And he reached out to Kate Cooper from Monash IVF and to me, and both Kate and I gave some input, and this has now gone to every hospital in Queensland. So the bloke's on the slab and he's an organ donor, then and his widow wants to be able to retrieve the sperm. Hopefully there's no conflict, it'll all happen smoothly. So anyway, I'll see what happens with the bill, I'll see what happens with my evidence, but I hope that the bill is enacted, fixes these problems, and that the ART Act can finally commence in all its glory on 1 March 2026. Thank you for watching and listening. I'm Stephen Page from Page Proven Family Fertility Lawyers. This is the Australian Family and Fertility Law Podcast.